The cameras flashed, the world cheered, and the headlines painted the picture of a perfect love story. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, stood beside his bride, smiling for the world to see. But what if that smile was a mask? What if, behind closed doors, he was drowning in regret? Hidden beneath the glamour of the wedding that captivated millions was a heartbreaking truth, a devastating moment so painful that it left Elvis whispering 5 terrible words that would change everything. What did he say? And why did the most powerful entertainer in the world feel utterly powerless? Stay with us as we uncover the shocking truth behind Elvis's most painful wedding moment. The world watched in awe as Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, stood at the altar, a vision of charm and confidence beside his stunning bride. The wedding photos captured a storybook romance: Priscilla in a breathtaking lace gown, Elvis dashing in a sleek black tuxedo, smiling, poised, and deeply in love, or so it seemed. Magazines and newspapers spread the images far and wide, solidifying the illusion of a fairy tale wedding. The ceremony, the opulent reception, and the dazzling press event afterward all fed into a perfectly curated narrative. To the public, it was a celebration fit for a king. But beneath the surface, something wasn't right. While the world imagined a grand, heartfelt ceremony, the reality was far different. The wedding itself lasted a mere 8 minutes, a shockingly brief exchange of vows for a couple whose love story had captured the fascination of millions. Only 14 guests were present, a stark contrast to what one would expect for an event of such magnitude. Even some of Elvis's closest friends, those who had been by his side for years, were left off the guest list, their absence speaking volumes. The rushed, almost clinical nature of the ceremony left many wondering, was this truly a union of love, or was there something more at play? Immediately after saying "I do," the couple was swept into an entirely different kind of performance, a press conference designed to satisfy the relentless media frenzy. Reporters fired off questions, cameras clicked non-stop, and the newlyweds put on a flawless display of joy and affection. Every detail, from their loving glances to their polished responses, felt carefully orchestrated. Then came the extravagant breakfast reception, an event as grand as the ceremony had been brief. Business executives from MGM, RCA, and the William Morris Agency mingled with family and friends, ensuring that the celebration remained as much about image and publicity as it was about the couple themselves. But what the cameras didn't capture, what the world didn't see, was the storm brewing behind the polished smiles and the sparkling champagne flutes. Beneath the surface of all the glamour, behind the flashing lights and staged romance, a painful truth lurked in the shadows. And as the night wore on, Elvis himself would utter 5 terrible words that exposed the reality of what was really happening. For years, Alberta Holman had been more than just a housekeeper in Elvis Presley's Graceland mansion. She was a trusted presence, a familiar face in his most private moments. Affectionately nicknamed Alberta VO5 by the king himself, she had watched over him like a protective figure, tending not only to his home, but to his heart. She had been there in his happiest moments, bringing him his favorite comfort meals, and she had witnessed his silent battles when no one else was around. But nothing could have prepared her for what she found just hours before the wedding. Elvis, the man who had the world at his feet, sitting alone in anguish, tears streaming down his face. Shocked by the sight of the usually confident and charismatic Elvis in such distress, Alberta hesitated before speaking. Finally, she asked the question that lingered in the air like an unspoken truth. "Why don't you just call it off?" It was a simple question, one that most men in his position could have answered without hesitation. After all, wasn't he the king of rock and roll? The man who set his own rules, lived by his own terms? If something was causing him pain, if he was truly unhappy, then why was he going through with it? Alberta waited for an answer, expecting anything but what came next. Elvis looked at her, his face heavy with emotion, and spoke 5 words that sent a chill through the room. "I don't have a choice." They were quiet, almost a whisper, yet filled with a weight that could crush a man. For a moment, the silence between them was deafening. Alberta knew Elvis better than most, but she had never heard him sound so defeated. These weren't the words of a man about to embark on the happiest day of his life. They weren't the words of someone making a lifelong commitment out of love. They were the words of someone trapped, someone being pulled into something he had no power to resist. But how could this be? How could Elvis Presley, the most famous entertainer in the world, adored by millions with more money, power, and influence than most could dream of, feel completely powerless? What force could possibly push him into a moment he so clearly did not want? And most importantly, if he had no choice, then who did? For years, Elvis Presley had lived his life on his own terms, bending the rules of fame and fortune to fit his desires. But behind the scenes, forces far beyond his control had been closing in, pressuring him into a decision that would alter the course of his life forever. One of the most looming figures in this growing tension was Priscilla's father, a strict military man who had long harbored concerns about his teenage daughter's relationship with one of the most famous men in the world. After years of watching their unconventional romance unfold, he was no longer willing to stand by and wait. Rumors swirled that he had drawn a hard line. Either Elvis made their relationship official, or he would take legal action. Given the sensitive circumstances of their early years together, it was a threat that couldn't be ignored. But there was another man pushing Elvis toward the altar, one whose influence had shaped nearly every major decision in his career, Colonel Tom Parker. The Colonel, ever the strategist, saw marriage not as a personal decision, but as a business move. He reportedly issued an ultimatum: marry her or let her go. There could be no in-between, no more years of speculation, no more uncertainty. To Parker, a proper wedding would maintain Elvis's image, satisfy the press, and keep everything under control. A scandal, on the other hand, could derail everything. Elvis, always torn between his personal desires and his obligation to those around him, was suddenly faced with an impossible choice, one that didn't truly feel like a choice at all. Adding to the tension were whispers of yet another threat, one that could have been even more damaging. Some insiders claimed that Priscilla herself had put pressure on Elvis in ways the public would never have imagined. After spending years as the hidden girlfriend of the most sought-after man on the planet, was she really willing to risk losing everything if he decided to walk away? Speculation grew that she may have warned Elvis that if he backed out, she wouldn't stay silent. There were details about their early years together, secrets that, if revealed to the press, could have caused a firestorm of controversy. Whether these rumors held any truth or not, the fear of scandal was enough to push Elvis further into a corner. And so, the stage was set. The wedding went ahead, the world celebrated, and the cameras captured a dazzling display of romance. But behind closed doors, the reality was far different. Because even after saying "I do," Elvis's troubles were far from over. In fact, his heartbreak was only just beginning. After the whirlwind wedding, Elvis and Priscilla jetted off to Palm Springs for what should have been a romantic honeymoon, but something felt off. Unlike the grand, extravagant getaways that celebrities of their stature typically enjoyed, this honeymoon was brief, just 3 days. It seemed almost rushed, more like an obligation than a celebration. Was it truly about spending time together? Or was it about maintaining the illusion that this was a love story for the ages? The world had just watched them say their vows, expecting the blissful start of a perfect marriage. But behind the luxurious setting, something was already unraveling. That unraveling only accelerated when Priscilla discovered she was pregnant just weeks after the wedding. Instead of the joyous reaction she had hoped for, she was met with something entirely different, an unsettling shift in Elvis's demeanor. He had spent years molding Priscilla into an image of innocence, a delicate and youthful presence in his life. But the news of her pregnancy changed everything. For a man with deeply complex views on intimacy and relationships, this new reality shattered the dynamic they once had. It was as if, in an instant, she had transformed into someone else in his eyes, someone he wasn't sure he wanted anymore. As months passed, the emotional distance between them only grew. Elvis became increasingly withdrawn, avoiding Priscilla in ways she never anticipated. The playful, affectionate moments they once shared became rare, replaced by long nights where Elvis sought comfort elsewhere, whether in the arms of his career, his friends, or other women. Priscilla, once the center of his world, now found herself on the outside looking in. She had given him the commitment everyone had expected, but in return, she was met with a coldness that stung deeper than she could have imagined. Years later, she would reflect on this shift, summing it up in one haunting confession. Elvis had a hard time dealing with me being a mother. It was as if the very thing that should have brought them closer had instead driven an irreversible wedge between them. The cracks in their marriage, which had appeared so soon after the wedding, would only deepen. And as time went on, the reality of what Elvis had truly felt on that fateful day would become undeniable. Looking back, Elvis's words on the eve of his wedding, "I don't have a choice," echo like a haunting prophecy. At the time, they were just 5 simple words, whispered in a moment of despair. But in truth, they held the weight of something far greater, an unspoken reality that would shape the course of his marriage. A man who had captivated the world with his voice, his charm, his undeniable presence, now found himself bound by obligations he could not escape. And as the years passed, those very words would prove to be the foundation upon which his marriage slowly crumbled. What began as a carefully curated public image soon unraveled into something Elvis could no longer control. The distance between him and Priscilla widened, not just physically but emotionally. The man who had once dictated his own destiny now found himself trapped in a life that didn't feel like his own. The responsibilities of marriage, the weight of fatherhood, the expectations of those around him, it all became suffocating. As his emotional turmoil deepened, he sought comfort elsewhere, immersing himself in his career, in his friendships, in fleeting affairs that only further distanced him from the life he had once built. The fairy tale wedding had been for the cameras, but behind closed doors, the reality was unraveling at a slow, agonizing pace. By 1972, the inevitable happened. Priscilla walked away. After years of feeling like an outsider in her own marriage, she made the painful decision to leave the man she had spent nearly her entire youth devoted to. Their divorce was finalized, and with it, the carefully constructed illusion of a perfect love story came crashing down. But the cracks had been visible long before the papers were signed. They had been there from the very start, hidden behind a forced smile, captured in fleeting moments of hesitation, and whispered in 5 quiet, devastating words. "I don't have a choice." Elvis Presley was a man who seemed to have it all: fame, fortune, and the adoration of millions. But behind the dazzling performances and the carefully crafted public image, he was fighting a battle no one could see. His wedding, a moment the world believed to be the pinnacle of romance, was instead a turning point in a life where love, duty, and obligation were at war. How could a man so powerful, so seemingly in control, feel so trapped? How could someone who brought joy to so many be carrying such deep heartbreak behind his smile? It's a question that lingers even today. The world saw Elvis and Priscilla as a golden couple, but was their marriage truly built on love, or was it a carefully orchestrated illusion? Did Elvis ever have a real choice in the matter? Or was he simply playing a role that had been decided for him long before he ever said, "I do"? One thing is certain: behind the smiles, Behind the flashing cameras, Elvis's heart was breaking. Now we want to hear from you. Do you think Elvis truly loved Priscilla, or was this marriage just a performance for the world? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into one of the most shocking moments of Elvis's life, be sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Check out our related videos for more untold stories and hidden truths about the life of the king.